Hi, we're here today with Finlay Millar, who's a member of the Strategy Finishing School and also a strategist at Beautiful Destinations. He's going to be taking us through his portfolio, which I think is a really great example of taking your passions and then trying to reverse the strategy behind them and show a bit of your own personality in the process. Finlay, I'll hand over to you.
Excited to take you through my strategy operating system today. I'm Finlay, I'm a strategist and I'm based in London. How I'm going to go through this today is just start with a little bit about me and kind of how I see strategy, then going into the strategic outputs and frameworks that a strategist can put together, and then some examples of these, and namely a strategy on a page, benefits ladder, creative brief, and a comms framework. So about me, I used to say I kind of fell into strategy like many, but using this exercise almost as like a reflective exercise, it made me realize that maybe it makes a bit more sense than I first thought. A lot of time in my free time, I'm kind of doing a load of research, putting in 20 or 30 sources to create a gym plan or an itinerary for my holiday. So I think it makes sense to fall into the strategy profession. I've been working in strategy now for 3 years at Beautiful Destinations. We are a strategy and content studio. Mainly in the travel vertical, we have one of the largest and most influential online travel communities. I think we're up to over 50 million followers now across platforms. This has given me the chance to do some really cool projects and work with some amazing clients such as California, Panama, the US and Saudi. But I thought this would be a good exercise for me to kind of flex my strategic and creative skills outside of travel. I've retrofitted the examples within this deck to different brands I'm interested in across kind of different industries. So the role of a strategist, obviously strategy is a word that gets thrown around a lot within marketing. So I thought it'd be good to kind of define how I see it up front. Strategy can be defined as a plan for overcoming a problem in order to achieve a goal. There's obviously many layers to this, but it's centered on having a deep understanding of the consumer, culture, trends, and the underlying motivations driving them all. Within this, ultimately, the role of a strategist is to create a reaction which provides direction and drives action. In terms of a strategic philosophy, I kind of try to package up the 3 core pillars I think of when I think of a good strategy. It should be simple. Hours of research definitely doesn't mean you need to have hundreds of slides. It should be driven by curiosity. You should never take anything for granted. Never assume that someone thinks the same as you, and never think just because something's always been done in one way, there's not a better way to do it. And then finally, it should be actionable. Whether you're talking to the creative team, social, production, everyone should leave with a clear idea of how to put your strategy into action. Otherwise, it's kind of a meaningless exercise. So outputs and frameworks. Kind of got here just the typical agency workflow and the different strategic outputs that can come at each stage. I tried to kind of map this to BD as a little exercise for myself, because it's a lot of evergreen content, a lot of always on content, and it kind of becomes more of a loop than necessarily like this linear process. But again, for this exercise, I thought I'd stick to the more traditional workflow. And with my examples, I'm kind of looking at the upfront section, the strategy on a page, creative brief, and the comms framework. Moving on to the examples. So the first example is a strategy on a page, and I looked at Tops. They are a sporting collectibles brand, and this was a piece of work they did for Euro 2024 and the sticker album they released for that. To give a bit of background, football stickers were first released in 1961 and became more prominent with the release of the 1970 World Cup album. However, as you can imagine, in the digital age, collecting sports trading cards can seem like a bit of an old school hobby. Even Mike Mahan, who leads Fanatics Collectibles, the parent company of Topps, has said that it's an industry that's lived in the shadows for all intents and purposes. During the pandemic, however, there was kind of a boom in this industry, probably down to people stuck at home and missing live sport. And whilst interest has begun to cool since then, Topps would have been looking to use Euro 2024 as an opportunity to engage more new fans. This led to this strategy on a page. Topps is launching their latest edition of official stickers, trading cards and collectibles connected to UEFA Euro 2024. Problem is, in an increasingly digital age, football stickers and trading cards are seen as a thing of the past for many adult football fans. However, as football fans get older, they'll often reminisce about the good old days and tournaments gone by. We need to remind them that the physical sporting collectibles make tournaments more enjoyable by making you feel more connected to what's happening on the pitch. So that adult football fans can make Euro 2024 as special as the tournaments from their youth, leading to an increase in sales of our official stickers, trading cards and collectibles when compared to UEFA Euro 2020. A couple just pointers of like how I got here and why I think this might have been the strategy. I think the use of Jose Mourinho is quite interesting. His heyday being mid-2000s to mid-2010s. Obviously, I think that would resonate more with a slightly older crowd, maybe older Gen Z, millennial crowd. And within the spots himself, he's kind of jokingly using them as an opportunity to become a manager at the tournament. He's never himself managed at an international tournament, so he's kind of utilizing Topps collectibles to feel more connected as you can at home. Sticking within sport, I looked at a benefits ladder for a recent kit launch for Arsenal. Again, to give a bit of background, Arsenal are one of the most successful football clubs in England, but they did go through a rust spell in recent years, failing to qualify for the UEFA Champions League for 5 years. However, after a successful season in 2023, they made their grand return to the pinnacle of European football and, to mark the occasion, released a new third kit, which is traditionally worn in European competition. However, within kind of broader football culture, there's been a significant rise of vintage football shirts, with more and more fans turning up to games in shirts from decades ago rather than shirts from the past 2 or 3 seasons. This certainly isn't anything to do with saving costs, as these jerseys can often cost 2, 3, 4 times as much as the new releases. This obviously kind of aligns with the wider fashion market and with Gen Z and millennials driving demand for vintage and retro pieces. You only really have to watch an episode of like the early seasons of Friends to see that everyone sitting in a coffee shop could be sitting in a coffee shop in 2024 and you wouldn't really notice a difference. So the consumer problem is I love supporting my team, but modern football jerseys just aren't as fashionable as those from the past. I highlighted a few product features, but I think the key one here is that this is actually a modern take on a classic jersey from 1982. Again, looked at a few functional benefits, but I think the most interesting one here is that it's a jersey I can wear in front of fashionable friends and football fans. Laddering up to the emotional benefit, it allows me to combine my different passions and boldly showcase my identity rather than having to make sacrifices. And here's the execution. As you can see, I mean, you could barely tell it was a football jersey. There's not a football field in sight. None of them are actually in the football kit. It's all linked to kind of these retro fashionable pieces. Moving on to the creative brief, I looked at a piece of work for Guinness on St. Patrick's Day, I believe the one just gone or potentially the year before. To give a bit of background, pub culture has long been a deeply ingrained part of life across the UK and Ireland. Anyone who's lived here for any amount of time will know that there's seemingly always a reason to have a drink, whether you're celebrating a birthday or just finishing work on a Thursday. This has led to the UK and Ireland consistently ranking among the top nations worldwide for binge drinking. However, in recent years, consumers, particularly those who are young adults, have become more health conscious, which has led to a decline in alcohol use and a rise of the sober curious generation. But with so many events in the UK and Ireland associated with drinking, many will feel as though they're missing out on fun. The consumer problem here, which I kind of laid out in the previous slide, the public are becoming more health conscious, which has led to a rise of the sober curious. However, consumers in the UK and Ireland have become so accustomed to alcohol-fueled fun, they feel like they're missing out when they're not drinking. But the insight is that people often believe they need alcohol to make a night out memorable, but consuming too much is more likely to make you forget it. Ultimately, they don't miss the alcohol, they miss the fun associated with it. So this led to the creative brief: get fun-loving young adults who are beginning to prioritise their health and interested in a sober, curious lifestyle to drink Guinness Zero this St. Patrick's Day by showing them that being sober doesn't mean having less fun. Again, a couple of reasons that kind of led me in this direction. The spot itself is a play on a TikTok trend with the singing Guinness, which obviously points towards kind of a younger audience. Also, just the premise of singing Guinness is kind of fun-loving, a bit juvenile, that silly kind of fun that you would associate maybe with having a drink with your friends and finding funny. And this is kind of showing you that you don't actually need to have the drink. You can just kind of have this silly fun with your friends anyway with a Guinness Zero. I also really liked they did a couple of activations in pubs across Ireland, changing O'Donoghue's or an O'Malley's to a 0.0 Donoghue's using the Guinness branding, which I just thought was really clever. And then finally, a comms framework. I looked at some recent work from Tinder. So again, the background here, generally speaking, dating apps are losing their appeal with daters of all ages, but this is especially true for Gen Z, who seem to be opting out of the dating app game. One reason for this is Gen Z are more focused on themselves, with self-love and self-care core themes for this demographic, leading many to write off dating apps and focus more on platonic relationships. Gen Z daters have also been said to have a harder time putting themselves in the vulnerable position online of seeking partnership, only to get passed over or ghosted. Again, the consumer problem identified is that the modern dating scene is messy. With issues such as ghosting commonplace, dating apps are seen as a key component to this, leading consumers to believe that algorithms aren't helping them find what they want. But the insight is that Gen Z may have become disillusioned with dating, but they haven't necessarily become disillusioned with love. Negative views on modern dating has made them forget the feeling of finding someone who gets you. I think you only kind of have to look at the rise of Colleen Hoover and her popularity and the just kind of ever-present popularity of rom-coms to show that there's still kind of this desire to find love and find your person. There's that step before that everyone's kind of becoming a bit disillusioned with. This led to the creative brief, Get Single Gen Zs, who are opting out of the dating app game and focusing on themselves, to download Tinder and find their perfect match by showing them that life is better when shared with someone who gets you. And that led to this comms framework. I used the living, looking, using journey. And the first barrier I identified in the living stage: I am disenfranchised with the dating scene and don't see the value a relationship would bring me, leading to the comms task: show that life is better when you have somebody to share it with. In terms of channel here, I was trying to think of moments in time where you might feel like they would be better shared with someone. So I called out public transport specifically, thinking maybe you've gone out for dinner or drinks with some friends. They could be going home either with their partner or to their partner, and you're going home by yourself. It could be one of those moments. Streaming services, social, you could be having a Friday night in, kind of sat scrolling, watching TV. Again, you might want to be doing exactly that, but it might be nicer if someone was there with you. Moving on to looking, barrier: dating apps are not there for serious relationships. They're just there for one-night stands. Comms task here: show that Tinder is the first step to a serious relationship. And in terms of channel here, I thought this message you should just kind of be immersed in. It's almost changing your perception of Tinder. So you kind of want it repeated to you out of home, TV, social, just to kind of change your perception of Tinder as an app that's just for one-night stands to something that can actually lead to a relationship. And then finally, using: I'm too nervous to use the app and go on a date. Comms task: highlight the amazing future possibilities if you're willing to take the jump. Channels: TV, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. Here, I was kind of thinking, what are the channels where this ad could be an immediate trigger to go on the app? If you're sitting scrolling Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, maybe you see this and you can immediately jump to Tinder. You could be watching TV, potentially doom scrolling, as many of us do when we watch TV. Again, it's just that immediate, okay, maybe I should give it more of a chance and really dive in. And yeah, that was my thinking of the channel there. Here's the execution for the campaign. You can see potentially where some of these sit within the comms framework. Realizing you're not dead inside might be that higher up, remembering what life is like when you're sharing it with someone. Hanging out in the daytime, you can see at the bottom, obviously speaks to Tinder not just being there for hookups, it's a serious relationship. You know, go out during the daytime. And then finally, having kids shows that like it can lead to these amazing possibilities. It's actually a little dog in that stroller, which is quite funny, but it's kind of pointing towards Tinder could be the first step to this kind of more serious relationship. And yeah, that is my operating system. Thanks for letting me run through it.
Finlay, I love this operating system. I think you did such a great job. And one of the things is, in the strategy finishing school, I ask you at the end of the fundamentals chapter to send through your operating system. So this is a document you're emailing to me, and then I'm giving you personalized feedback. I think the one thing I would see is if you were doing this in front of a client, we might just strip away a couple more of the words. But because I had to see the document myself and read everything, I think that was the best kind of document to send. But I want to highlight some of the areas where I think you were fantastic, like really, really good. I think your insight work is phenomenal. And one technique I really liked that I saw kind of come through in two pieces there was it's this, not this, which was in the Tinder piece and the Guinness piece. They don't miss alcohol, they miss the fun. And then the other one, like they still want love, they just don't want dating. And I thought that was such a nice twist that you've got there, and just like pulling those two apart. My light bulbs went off in my head there, and I think that's just, you've got a really strong technique for doing it there. The other things that I really love, I thought your background to before you get into the strategy on a page, before you get into all the other pieces, was really great. Like you really sum it up, a big complex topic, really well in a couple of slides. So I thought that was really good. The supporting points, and I noticed you did this, you screen capped an article and then had the publisher there. fantastic. It just, when you see that slide, it just adds weight and conviction to what you're saying when you've got, hey, the New York Times agrees with me, or they're on this same page as well. Again, a great piece. And then finally, I thought your comms framework, a lot of people struggle with a comms framework, especially how the media comes to life. And I thought you did really well there. One of the things that I probably cover a little bit in the course, but more when you go into the comms planning module, is that media can also be timings. And I think that's what you started to suggest, like coming home on the train late at night, or Friday nights alone, or the Sunday scaries, and kind of putting those in those different buckets is really smart, because I think people just jump to media, but you can also do time of year, time of the day, time of the week. And so I really like that you kind of went there and really thought through all the different levels. So fantastic work, great portfolio. It was great to see. Now, I'd love to hear just your experience in the strategy finishing school. Why did you sign up, and what were you looking for before joining the finishing school?
I joined the finishing school. I work fully remote, and I think when you do that, you kind of, obviously there's the element that you lose of just in person, kind of those skills that you might pick up just from shadowing someone day in, day out, just something to solidify that knowledge and give me that little edge that you might be missing out on. Now we're in kind of digital times. And I went to one of your seminars. Just immediately I was sending it to my boss, and I was like, I'd really like to do this. I think it will really help me kind of build my strategic foundations and just like support the company more. And he and BD were very supportive in that, and kind of immediately sent me on the course. As you say, like strategy, there's a lot of complex topics, and I just think the course does a really good job in kind of breaking them down into modules, these specific lessons. I also don't have an amazing like unaided memory, but as soon as I kind of read something or just see a video, and then it just sparks, and I kind of remember how to do a certain like framework or just what these phrases mean. So I think the strategy finishing school is really useful for that, because no matter what you're doing, you can kind of dive in, just find the module, find a specific video. You can have a 5-10 minute catch up, and then before you dive into your work. I was kind of initially, when I was just searching for that foundational strategy knowledge, which can be hard to find. Like I've read a lot of books on it, but I really like the tasks, like as you're going through, you're reading on it, and then you're doing like you're actively putting it into work. And I found that to be really useful.
Excellent. And were there any frameworks that you've been able to apply into your work, day-to-day work now, or anything that kind of stuck with you?
Comms frameworks we obviously use, and I think this definitely gave me a better understanding of how to use them. Strategy on a page I'll always now use, like even if it's not necessarily going into like a client-facing deck, or even if I'm sharing it with anyone, just kind of internally to help me understand what the kind of task at hand is. There's obviously the framework factory. There's just everything in there. There's always something that, because I usually throw all my thoughts down as I'm working on something, and I have like everything listed down, and it's really helpful to just kind of scroll through and look at, okay, how's the best way to package this up and kind of tell the story when you're showing it either internally to people within your team or client facing.
And for anyone who's on the fence about the strategy finishing school, is there anything you'd tell them about it now, having been through?
I'd just say, I mean, personally for me, it's definitely been worth it. It gives you that extra level of confidence, just that you kind of do know what you're doing. And obviously strategy can be a bit wishy-washy, and like you can question your value at times, but it kind of sets up exactly how strategy is useful, and then how to make an effective strategy. And kind of once you have confidence in both of those elements, I think it really sets you up to do great work.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your portfolio. It was a ripper. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks very much for having me.